Have you ever wanted to know what a fabulous Furby would look like? Well, I have, and I've decided to make my most beautiful Furby creation out of this Na 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 doll. So I hope you'll come along and see our beautiful transformation. Welcome, artists, artists, and art appreciators to Art of Lore. Today I am doing my first full Na 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 doll custom. Now, if you don't know what these dolls are, they are squishy sort of vinyl dolls, all vinyl. Usually dolls have vinyl heads and sometimes vinyl bodies, but typically hard plastic legs. The point of the Na 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 dolls is that they are made of a soft vinyl that is somewhat hollow so that they are squishy, but they are covered in fabric. Now I'm going to be removing the fabric and replacing it with different fabric so it still kind of retains that semi-doll, semi-plush quality that I really like in the Na 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 dolls. And we shall be replacing it with a Furby, sort of. We aren't going to use an actual Furby, I'm afraid, because I did not want to purchase and then disassemble a Furby. But you'll see. We'll make it Furby. It will be Furby, heavily Furby inspired, but not out of a literal Furby because I'm not a monster. I didn't skin a Furby for this. Now I have removed the face of a Na 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 doll before. Last year I did a custom with a damaged Na 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 that I found at a thrift store, and I did a face up. And that went pretty well, but I really wanted to remove all of the fabric from a Na 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 and replace it all to see what I could kind of do with that. And I really wanted to do it with a fluffy fabric. That was the important thing, was I wanted to make a design that would be all fuzzy, or at least partially fuzzy. So that's kind of why I went with Furby. At first I was thinking just furry, like I could make a dog or cat, but something about the idea of putting like a Furby face directly on the doll was just like, once it came into my mind, it couldn't leave. I was like, I need to make the Furby and put it on the Na 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 doll instead of just like a generic like dog or something. And like, I am still tempted to do a dog or cat kind of Na 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 custom, but this Furby was my first deep dive into that. And by the way, all of these pieces on the Na Na Na, they were quite difficult to get off. I believe they are like pierced, like the legs and arms are pierced through a hole in the fabric. So you do actually have to like tear a piece or cut it to get them off. But I tried to get all of the pieces off in one piece so that I could try to make like a little pattern for my future pieces. This didn't work that well because these pieces are kind of stretchy, and not all of the fabric I was able to find was stretchy, as I'll show you in a minute. But still, I tried my best to peel everything off in one piece. It was also sort of for like my sanity. Like I just spent a really long time trying to get all those stitches out and then perfectly pulling everything out. Anyways, you can see now she is just a white vinyl doll. I removed her hair, removed all of her pieces. I still have them. By the way, she did come with clothes, and I gave them to my other Na 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 dolls, who needed more clothes. I don't know, needed a bigger wardrobe. The Furby herself will not be wearing clothes, just so you know. And here's my rough pattern pieces. You really don't need that much fabric in order to cover a Na Na Na, but ideally it would be stretchy fabric, because some of these ended up not being quite big enough, like especially this leg piece. I ended up using this yellow fabric that I just had lying around. Most of my projects like these, like the little ones, are made out of stuff that I already have. So I wasn't about to go out and get new yellow fabric that was stretchy just for this. So I just used yellow fabric that I already have, and it wasn't stretchy, which meant the pattern obviously didn't work. I don't know why I didn't think through this before. And I had to recut the pattern pieces, so that was kind of annoying. Still, it worked out fairly well in the end, other than the fact that her legs are a little wrinkled in some areas because I couldn't match the pattern very well, and the parts weren't stretchy, like I said, but that's fine. I'll live. Also, regarding the arms and legs, they are not, like, posable on these dolls, and I considered trying to put a wire in, before I put the fabric on. And so I tried to use one of my armature wires. The vinyl's very soft and the legs are technically hollow, so I sort of poked a wire in there. But the thing about this type of rubber is that it's a little bit too stiff for the wire to like hold things into position. So that was kind of out after I tried it once. The feet that I attempted to do first didn't turn out very well, so I kind of ended up putting little socks on her. My original design had little ruffs around the feet anyways, so I just covered up the seam between those with the little ruffs after the fact. And I made sure to give her like little sort of paws like the Furby has. The Furby kind of has paws. And I just did a lot of sewing all of those little pieces on, mostly by hand. Almost everything that I did in this project was by hand, except for like a few little tiny pieces, like part of the leg loop was machine sewn, but pretty much everything else just had to be hand sewn, so it was as tight to the body as possible. Now, for the hands of the Furby, I wasn't exactly sure whether I should make them like all fabric, all a different color, more like the legs. I knew I didn't want to make them like the legs ideally. So I ended up going with this darker gray color because it was the only thing close to gray I had. It's actually kind of bluish, but it ended up matching pretty well. So the source of the fabric is a jacket I found at Goodwill. Usually I don't like to buy things for projects like I said, but occasionally I will seek out like some cheap fabric for a very specific reason, and it was only like a couple bucks, so that was fine. I didn't have to go to a craft store. I wanted to go to Joann's while it was closing, but it turns out that like minky fabric that everyone uses for like plushies is very expensive, even when Joann's is closing and on sale. It was like, it would have cost me like over $20 to get just like a little bit of it, and I was like, I don't think that's worth it. And I only ended up using like a sleeve of the jacket so far, so I'm kind of glad that I didn't get something fancier. Because, spoiler alert, I like how she turned out without having to spend all that money. And the fabric was also a little bit, like, stretchy. So I didn't have any problems with that. Plus, the fact that there are so many, like, little fuzzies kind of disguise a lot of the, like, issues. Like, they disguise the threads that are tying them together pretty well. So, I like that. So when I was thinking about making a Furby doll, I did ask my followers over on Tumblr for input on my ideas. And I also asked them actually to vote whether or not I would be making Furby first, as opposed to the other idea that I had in mind, which was a na-na-na doll mixed with a Labubu. The Labubus are like super popular, trendy right now, and I feel like I could do the same thing that I did in this video, but with a Labubu type face, and I even drew a mock-up for it, but it's not as cute as I want it to be, so I get why people chose the Furby instead. I think I still have to iterate a little bit on that, but if you're interested in seeing the Labubu idea come to fruition, then let me know, I guess. So I actually had a lot of ideas for my Furby doll, and I posted a bunch of them on Tumblr for everyone to see, using the kind of color palette that I had available to me. My original Furby, Furbette, was all pink fabric, and people liked that idea a lot, but it's just, I didn't find pink fabric at the store. I found gray fabric, so I went with gray, which also does seem to be more like Furby appropriate color, because I feel like the like classic Furby is gray. So I was happy to go with that. But I did a lot of pink accessories. Now my Furby ideas varied from a very literal Furby onesie kind of thing with like an exact Furby face, to the long legs that are orange, to Furby with hair, Furby with poof on head. And the last one that I eventually kind of ended up going with is my final Furby with the little ruffs around the feet and the pink hair and sort of an eyeshadow glam look. And that's just because I just felt like that one was the most detailed. If I was going to make a Furbette, I should like go with something really more complicated than just a simple Furby. And also, I feel like there should be a reason that she is Furbette instead of Furby. You know, like, not just with the Furby face, but with like some Furby details, let's say. So, obviously, that includes a decent amount of pink and orange, so we've got some different colors. I ended up making that stuff out of felt and a little bit of just yarn that I had lying around. I will say I do think I made the ears a little bit small, but that's okay. They are still cute. The details on the legs, of course, I just painted on. They're pretty simple and straightforward, and they're meant to, you know, mimic like a bird, like the scoots on a bird's legs. I do think that they give her kind of like a Big Bird appearance, which comparisons to like the Muppets they're basically inevitable. I mean, I showed people the works in progress and they were like, that looks a lot like the Muppets, and I'm like, you know what? She does look a lot like a Muppet. She looks like a Furby, but she also looks like a Muppet, which I'm fine with. I like the Muppets. In fact, I think she looks kind of like a Fraggle from Fraggle Rock, but you know, we'll go over that a bit later. On to the sculpting. So, when I decided to start making this Furbette, I knew that I probably didn't want to use a typical Furby sort of face. Now there are like 3D printed Furby faces online that you can download. I don't really have access to a 3D printer though, so I didn't want to go with that. It would just be too inconvenient for too little, I guess, reward, because I'd have to be cleaning up the printer. And I'd have to like go to the library and everything. And another option was someone suggested getting one of the McDonald's Furbies, because they have like mini faceplates that are very like basic. So I did consider that, but it just wasn't an easy option because I'd probably have to like buy one online. And honestly, I would either have to buy like 10 of them or spend a lot on shipping for a tiny Furby. And that didn't feel worth it either. So I decided to just sculpt a Furby face, and that way I could also make it a little bit unique. In my design, I added like little cheeks, which I was originally going to paint pink. Now, obviously I wanted to keep the like sort of perfectly round eyes. I will say that one of the points of feedback that I got was on my Furby designs was that the eyes should look, you know, a little unsettling like a Furby. And not to say Furbies are unsettling, although they kind of are. But I think one of the really important things to think about when making a Furby-like character, well, making a character that is in, I guess, a unique style that a lot of people find unsettling, is making something that is not intentionally unsettling, because Furbies are not intended to look kind of like I said, unsettling. Sorry, I used that word a lot of times in a row. But you know, Furbies are not meant to look as alarming as they are. I believe they are meant to look like they are attentive, because, you know, they're supposed to like talk to you. But I feel like they're kind of odd eyes did unnerve a lot of people, which helped with giving them their poor reputation besides the microphones in them. And nowadays they have Furbies with like big, googly, like cute eyes, which are more how eyes on dolls and toys look nowadays. But it doesn't give Furby to me. And I think a lot of other people who like know Furbies as a little bit more piercing, let's say. So I knew I had to make the face have very round components and not very like, in that very kind of mechanical way, but I wanted to connect all the pieces together because these eyes aren't going to move. I will say, I went down a whole rabbit hole in my mind thinking about how I could possibly make a Furby's eyes move in this contraption, how I can make like a special one for the doll. I thought through so many things, and then I was just like, no, absolutely not. I want this to be like a fun, silly little project. For this project, I wasn't always the happiest with like how my sewing turned out with like the legs and the feet, but I was just telling myself like, I want to do something that I'm happy with the result, but I'm not like trying to do everything over and over again. Like I stopped myself after I redid the feet and redid the hands once, off camera, so you didn't see all of that. I told myself, don't do it a third time. We're not doing it a third time. We're limiting ourselves and our output, and we're still going to make a thing that makes us happy, makes me happy, but without redoing everything or doing something like super complicated that I could mess up. So we went with a pretty basic, let's sculpt a Furby face, but not all of the Furby details, and it's a little unique because, like I said, it's got those like little cheeks. I did do the classic little thingy on top of the Furby's head. I used some wooden balls for the Furby beak and the Furby eyes with a little bit of clay on top to make the beak, a little open. I didn't pose it like it's smiling like in the reference image. It's just open a teeny tiny bit and completely straight across otherwise. So depending on what angle you look at her at, she does look a little bit smiling, but if you look at her from other angles, she's got a very neutral expression, let's say. But I thought this process was pretty enjoyable because it was just chill. I will say these wooden balls do not stick to clay at all. Clay and wood does not generally get along, but that was fine. It actually meant that the eyes were kind of loose in the head and removable after I baked them. I did stick them into place eventually, but that was kind of like an interesting side effect was I was able to move the eyes at first. Now they are very firmly placed in. One thing that I did as I was finishing up the Furby face is I realized that my Furby face would not fit completely on the head as is because it was just so big. I had considered making the eyes a little smaller, like using a different size of wooden ball, but I just felt like this size of wooden ball was so good and like large, but it's just the faceplate itself was not quite right. So I ended up bending the faceplate a little while it was baking, which did have an effect on how I had to paint them later on, which I didn't really think about because now the eyes are very, very slightly angled away from one another. But I think it was worth it because it helps sort of match the face, and she definitely is a more organic looking Furby than like a classic Furby, so I definitely think that was a good call. On to the painting section. First of all, gessoing up our beautiful Furby face. Thinking about how I'm so close to running out of gesso, but I need it so much for these projects because clay and acrylic paint usually work a little bit better with a little bit of gesso in between. So we're going with a nice gray color. This ended up a darker gray than her fur, but it's kind of a nice medium actually between like the dark gray on her hands and the dark gray on her ears. So I felt like it worked out pretty well. You can see I'm painting a little bit sloppily at first, so sorry if you are obsessed with coloring in the lines, but let's just go for it. Now, once I was painting the face, I sort of had to reckon with what how many details, what would I do with the face? Should I just paint it all one color? Should I make it super flat? And I felt like while making her face like completely flat, or even like adding the like little cheeks like in my original drawing would be more accurate to the original Furby, I just kind of started going with it, and I started making this sort of feathery pattern which matches the fur on her head, well, the fur on her entire body, like the fuzzy fabric that I chose. And I just kind of was experimenting and like going with what I felt like would sort of match that vibe so that the face would blend in with the rest of the head. And I will admit it's very owlish. I wasn't looking at any references. I was like I don't even know what I was doing. I think I just like blacked out and then I woke up and this Furby was here. Because I was really just like, what do I do? It's a face. It looks kind of like an owl. Let's make kind of like an owl thing. Let's match it to the rest of the fabric. And I think it turned out really well because it's like a more organic take on the Furby. It's an organic Furby, an organic grass, home ranged, whatever, a Furby, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm saying here. I just went with it, and I was really happy with how it turned out, so I hope people like it, and it's not too far off of, like, the idea of a Furby, or not too, like, Muppet-like. Like I said, people were like, it looks kind of like a Muppet. I was like, you know what? It does look like a Muppet, and I'm happy with that. Muppets are great. I'm happy with it even looking like a Fraggle Rock character. But I guess what I'm hoping is it still looks enough like a Furby for people, even with all the little detail. I did add a little bit of pearlescent shimmer onto her eyes and the little thing on her head, and I was intending to fill the thing on her head with, like, a clear, like, that's why I made it dimpled. It's like I wanted to put, like, a clear thing in it to add, like, a little gem. But that has not worked out so far. I added a lot of layers of, like, a gloss, but they ended up opaque because I mixed a bit of paint in them at one point because I wanted to cover up the pearlescence because I didn't like the pearlescence. And I did the same thing with her eyes. I mostly covered up the pearlescence in the end. I didn't think it fit the vibe as much. It didn't match the pink on the rest of her. Like the pink that's on her fabric body is very, like, it's just a felt that I had. It's very, like, neon pink almost. I don't know. Maybe like a very red pink. And then the colors I was adding to the, like, eyes started off as a very magenta pink. Probably because I bought a magenta paint for it. Well, not for it, but I did buy a magenta paint a while ago so that I would have magenta instead of red, because technically magenta is, like, a better primary color, and I realized that I was having trouble mixing nice pinks out of just my red paint and my blue. That is neither here nor there. Anyways. We're adding some beautiful eyeliner to our beautiful Furbette. Obviously, she's very feminine with her eyeliner and also dark under eyes. Now, the eyes are really the most important part of the Furby, the Furbette, if you will. And this was the part that I was more scared about than anything. And I will say, I did sort of redo them off camera. So they might look a little different than this, but I followed the same sort of basic process when I was making the eyes. It's just, remember how I said that because I bent the faceplate, the eyes are looking away from each other a little? Well, I was trying very hard to make the irises symmetrical, and because I was trying so hard to make them symmetrical and looking straight ahead, I didn't take into account that the eyes are like tilted slightly. So it kind of made her look like she was looking in 2 different directions at once. And I mildly adjusted that, but I used the same basic idea, which is starting with a black base. I did do a little bit of a gradient, but the sort of way that the Furby eyes look is they're a black background and then there are a bunch of lines going in the middle. There's no gradient, but the fact that the lines sort of are closer, obviously, in the center than they are on the edges forms sort of a gradient pattern. And also this was terribly painstaking and difficult to do because I had to keep the lines really, really little. The main change that I ended up doing to the eyes was, besides the eye position, was removing those like highlights and just relying on adding lots and lots of layers of gloss so that the eyes would be very glossy and have that nice shine to them without having like artificial highlights. I felt like that was more Furby-esque. I used hot glue to put her face on. Technically, I feel like the most professional thing would be to like sew it on, but I was worried that if I put holes in the faceplate, that the clay could like crack if it was like under pressure from the string at some point. I felt like it was actually safer to use hot glue because now if her face comes off, like it's coming off in one piece. Whereas like if there was like string, it might like break it apart if it had like holes in it and it was sewn on. So I really think in this situation, hot glue was the much better concept for it. And it should, because the back of it, the faceplate is pretty rough, and I'm putting it on fabric, it should stick pretty well. Thank you to my Ko-fi supporters, Luca, Isella, Serendipity, and Gabby Rose. Okay, on to the reveal. I hope you enjoyed this video of me creating this lovely Furby character, Furbette. She is very fun, and I'm glad that I ended up choosing to make her and sort of hand make her and also not worry about everything being 100% perfect all of the time. She was just like a very chill project to do. I have a lot of other things kind of going on right now, and so this was like a fun way to relax and everything. So out of all of my doll customs, I do feel like this one is, I'm already like very attached to her. Something about the Na dolls, they kind of remind me of like Groovy Girls when I was a kid. Like I like dolls, I like stuffed animals. When I was a kid, I did really like the Groovy Girls, although I think I like the Groovy Girls horse more than the dolls themselves sometimes, but anyways. And I really like the Na dolls, and I think they're just like good for custom. It's funny because like I kind of don't like their faces that much, but I like their concept so much it makes up for it, and it just makes me want to like make customs of them and then carry them around because I don't know, I just feel like there's such like a stuffed animal quality to them that makes me be like, oh, I just want to take it place, because I take my stuffed animals places. I take my custom dolls places to like take photos, but I don't get to carry them around that often, most of them, because they're just a little bit on like the delicate side, or they have like small pieces that I could lose. Whereas I feel like Furbette could really go on some adventures with me. Like I'm holding her in my hand like she's a little like a squishable, she's not that squishable, but you know, she's got like a little bit of squishy body. She's mostly sewn together, so she seems pretty sturdy. I don't know. It's just a very fun little doll to have and like to mess around with, and I'm happy that I made her. So if you like this video, you know, please leave a like, leave a subscribe. You can go check out some of my other videos if you want. And yeah, I'll see you in the next craft project. Bye bye.